I'd like to first start off this podcast episode 38 of The Bench, powered by Wowhead, taking a brief moment of silence for Oracle Disc Priest.
Rest in peace. Poor Oracle Disc Priest. They lived a good life. They were meta for almost 2 or 3 weeks. Rest in peace, Oracle Disc Priest 2025 to 2025.
Or if you're a Holy Paladin player, Pack Watch Oracle Disc Priest 2025 to 2025.
Jeez.
Okay, so this week we got some interesting class tuning happening. Growl went kind of sicko mode on last episode. We also kind of have some other stuff with target capping, tank threat, boosting. I saw some stuff about like gold swaps from retail to classic. How have you been doing this week, Growl? How's raid been going for you?
Oh geez. Well, good. Raid not good. Things
Okay.
good. Today was a little bit of a spring cleaning day. I got a bunch of like shit out of my closets and went through the laundry, and we're sitting in a the cleanest our room's been probably of the year. Sort of feeling pretty good. Raid not so good. Yeah, we had an interesting raid week. I think we're raiding today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dude, I started doing a Zero to Hero series on an Ellie Shaman this week. I know that you've done a couple of them in the past. Man, I think that like the quality of player that you get into LFG is so variable these days. It is actually crazy. If you just like scout out the right players in LFG, it changes like so much of the situation that you're having whenever you're actually pugging keys. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, the Zero to Hero or like the pugging thing is actually very interesting. You mentioned you want to talk about it. I definitely want to get into it. We have some like miscellaneous topics today. Obviously,
Yeah.
there's like the big balance patch that's coming out like the day that everyone's hearing this, but I do want to hear your thoughts and sort of how things have been going and all that too with the Zero to Hero.
So I'm trying to get to 3k IO. That's like the goal of the character, right? Like, as I think that getting all 10s done, I would be done. No, I could do that at, I don't even know, 645 on a level. But I think to get 3k IO, I'm going to have to actually be able to gear the character and play the character at like a pretty competent level. And I suck at Ellie right now. But one of the things that I'm doing differently than you've done in the past is I'm doing it on stream. Like, do you think that takes away from it? Like, so obviously I'm trying to avoid anybody off my friends list, and I tell people in my stream to not sign up to the key. So I think I'm getting like mostly an authentic experience. Or do you think it's still problematic to do it on stream?
So there's like a bunch of different degrees to which like being Zero to Hero exists. So like the first thing that I did that like not a lot of people do is the whole gold situation and like how you like start up the character, if you will. And like my very first Zero to Hero series, one of the things I took a lot of care in was like I literally made it a fresh level 60 or whatever it was at the time. And I went through the process of like gearing it up in heroics and trying to get gold and all that. Part of it because I wanted to show that it was, a thing and I wanted to be more of a beginner series, but I don't necessarily think you have to do that
Yeah.
for, you know what I mean? Like literally, like my honest recommendation if you're somebody that's starting off is literally take your credit card out, swipe a WoW token, and then you have 200,000 gold or 300,000 gold, and then you can buy all the consumables you need for your whole Zero to Hero, like for a month. So like when it comes to streaming it, I think so I'm sure I'm not spoiling anything or giving you any secret hints here, but I'm sure you learn very quickly that every single key that you do is your own key in LFG, and joining other people's keys is like completely impossible, right? You figured that out?
So my guy's privated. I tell people not to sign up. I have queued into 0 people's group so far. I have a full vault of 10s done on a 645 0 tier piece shaman. And I have listed my key 100% of the time so far.
Yep, because you just can't get into groups, right? Like it's just not even possible.
I
And
would
so
never-
I
I would
think if
never get
you're
into a group.
so if you're the group leader, you can sort of curate your own, experience. Um, so like, you can do it on stream, but then if like you're not like you're probably like looking at the IOs of people and like if it doesn't make sense for this person to be signing up for your key, then you're not accepting them, which honestly is like probably even a little harder than normal experience, right? Because normally when I've done any Zero to Hero or just like geared up a character, you'll find people that are overgeared. They're just either they're helping a buddy or they're bored or they're learning a dungeon or whatever the hell they're doing in that key. They like blast and they can completely carry you, especially when you get to like those milestones of like the first Gilded Crest key. I think it's like 6 or 7, and then weekly 10s. So I don't necessarily think it has to be like it can't be on stream, but I do think it's a nice touch, especially when you do like a YouTube thing out of it to keep it all secret. But I don't think it really, for the purpose of like what you're trying to accomplish, I don't think it needs to be off stream. No.
Yeah, to me, I think I was going for like entertainment because it could be a harder challenge, right? Like kind of like what you said the first time you did it like completely self-made where you didn't have gold or anything like that, and like I could have gone the absolute hardest challenge of it, but like realistically, I think that the jump from 11 to 12 and 12 to 13 is going to require me to have to actually play the character to the point where I don't even think I could necessarily get boosted through it as much. I mean, obviously, like you can, but it's going to be much harder to get boosted through it. I had another question. So in the past, you've broken them up into separate video series. Did you ever consider making it one long video?
Like, what do you mean?
On YouTube? Thing? Yeah, like the entire thing. So like, do you ever watch Pokemon Nuzlocke on YouTube?
No, but I know what that is.
Okay, so they'll make the video like one really long video as opposed and like basically document the entire journey, and they'll like separate it into chapters. Did you ever consider making it like a 1.5 hour long
I think
video?
that's like really bad for monetization.
Okay.
I've considered doing something like that out of like laziness or whatever, just to like throw it all together. But I think like one long video is not nearly going to do as well for you as like 10 cut up videos or whatever.
Okay. I was considering making it one long video, but maybe.
One thing I didn't consider too is you're talking about 3K IO, so that's like half 12s, half 13s, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that you do have to consider is like as you get up into that level of keys, you're starting to get to the point where you're at some of your viewers like actual key levels, if that makes sense. And so you do get a little bit of a skewed experience like at that very top level because some guy can not pretty easily stream snipe you if he's that level of a player, right? Now, granted, he's not going to carry you, but you will get a little bit of a more positive experience. Like, you'll be more likely to have people in your keys that like won't be toxic shitheads, and they'll probably want to use consumes, and they'll care about their damage being good, right? Like, I think you're actually going to get a better experience overall streaming. I mean, not a ton, right? I'm not saying everybody.
I'm telling them to not sign up. Like it's being. I'm like explicitly saying don't sign up if you.
And yeah, well, also too, like you are the group leader, so like if you have, you just try not to invite the same people to more than one key. So it's not going to be huge, but there is that factor. I think people will point out as well that like the people in your group are more likely to behave. I think
I might not end up having to like because once I get to a certain key level and a certain gear level, I might not have to be the group leader the entire time. There may be a chance that I actually start to queue into keys, like the last key that I need or something like that, the last couple that I need.
That's true. Yeah. Once you get to the last couple and your IO's looking good, especially if you end up like pushing yours up higher, like doing a couple 13s, 14s, then like getting a 12 will not be like that'll be easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of been interesting. I also, you and I have been, I think, talking a little bit off stream. I did the kidnapping somebody in LFG thing today.
Oh, geez, how did that go?
So we try. I have to turn this into a YouTube video.
Laughing.
It's so we tried to take somebody.
If you don't want to spoil stuff, you can keep it secret as well. But
yeah, it's whatever. It'll still be. I think it'll still be a good video. So I tried to take somebody.
Well, hold on. So before you talk, to preface this, me and Tettles talked about the idea of some sort of content with resilient keys. Because now that you have a resilient key, it's not like you're ruining a key if you bring somebody in it that isn't quite qualified. So we've been kind of shooting around different ideas about like what we could do. Any range from like, completely trolling people and like throwing in a really super high key in a low group to like maybe bringing lower level people up or whatever. So I still don't even know exactly what Tettles did. So now go ahead and explain what you did.
What he did today. And I might do something where it's just like me and just like a bunch of people from LFG or something like that. And we try to learn like in prog, like some resilient 16 or whatever that I have. That might be something that I end up doing at some point. We'll see. But today, we what I would describe it as like reverse griefing, where we listed something as a 10. We we listed it was a 15 Dark Flame Cleft, but we listed it as a 10. And then we took somebody who was like, who had not timed the dungeon even on a 10. It was like 2,500 IO on an MM Hunter. And he didn't have any alt characters linked or anything like that. So I thought that was his main character. It ended up being that he had his main privated, so it didn't show up on the Raider IO. But his like note was like, I'm a gamer. We were like, but it was like kind of clear halfway through that he knew what was not like he was like a viewer or anything, but he kind of, you could tell that he was like capable of doing the dungeon.
You were like
15.
waiting for him to do dumb stuff, and he was like keeping up with those
exactly
and the routes and stuff. And you're like, wait a second, this guy isn't supposed to know this.
Yeah, it was something like that. I was like, oh fuck. I think it'll probably still end up turning into a good YouTube video, but I was like, oh damn it, this is maybe a little bit better than we anticipated because then it turned out his main was like 3,100 or something like that. So it's like,
oh yeah. So I mean, still a 15 key is like pretty good, especially for not that.
He was like
character.
He was like 655. His damage was bad. Like his damage wasn't good either. But he was like a vengeance main, and so it was clear that mechanically he was more than capable, which I think it helped us time the key.
Yeah, we had a pretty funny key today where a guy, I was just like doing alt weeklies on my mage, and someone was like, hey, I got like a 10 mother load, I'll come help. And then he helped with a key. He was a tank. He had only done like 10s or 11s, I think, like that, just doing weeklies or whatever. And then we get a 12, and I'm just like, all right, we're gonna go next. And then sure enough, he just like slides in the 12, and we like time it because a couple of the other people in the key are like good as well. And I mean, he played really well. He didn't make mistakes, but I looked at his IO, and he had that was his first 12 of the season, was a Jangbi weekly key in Floodgate. So shout out to that guy. I maybe jokingly trolled his tanking abilities a few times, but when you're a mage DPS, you gotta do it.
The Jangbi weekly experience for sure.
Arcane's kind of fun. It's definitely like a stupid slot machine where like basically you have one button that you mash on AoE kind of, and you have like a very high % chance to like reset your stacks and like keep pressing it. And so you're just like, shoot, okay, reset, shoot. You're just like spamming your button over and over, and then eventually you miss, and you're like, God damn it, and you have to like build it back up. But it's been fun. I've been learning Arcane a little bit.
How long have you played Arcane for?
So I played only Fire last expansion.
Yeah.
Then this expansion, I started as Arcane, but I didn't really quite like get to the point where I was doing real keys. So like, what was max eye level last patch? Like 639 or something like that.
Yeah, 639 was the
so my guy was like 620, like low 620s. So like I didn't even really fully gear it. I just like did a few weekly keys and like hit the target dummies. So I've like basically not played Arcane at all. Like I just started again, and now I'm gonna try and do like some actual sort of keys.
Well, good news. Arcane's getting a buff. It's the upcoming class tuning on April 15th.
Oh hell yeah!
So apparently,
I'm glad my main spec is getting buffed. My Arcane Mage.
Yeah. So Demonology was originally on the list of getting a buff. Now getting a little bit less of a buff. I think that this was going to end up turning into like 4 or 5% on AoE and like 3-ish% or something like that on single target. So it was going to be a pretty substantial buff, but a little bit less. Oh, went away. But yeah, they also hit a lot of other classes, including a bunch of healers. So where do we want to start with this? What do you think, Growl?
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, the big topic for sure is the healers. So we talked a lot about Oracle Dispriest in the last podcast, and I mean, part of the crash out is because I knew like I've seen this before, right? Like this isn't my first rodeo. I know that as soon as this public outcry thing happens where every content creator is talking about a spec, like it's gone. Like it's just gonna get deleted. And so maybe it's this patch, maybe it's next patch, but I knew it was coming. So sure enough, they roll out the patch 2 weeks later of nerfing Oracle Dispriest. To summarize, basically they nerfed shield size by some amount. I mean, obviously you're still going to be able to put out big shields. They also nerfed the throughput of sort of just Oracle Dispriest. They nerfed the penance, healing, and damage, which was like one of your big, like both spot healing and AoE healing tools, and like a very, very tiny slight atonement nerf, mainly a nerf for raid, a pretty big nerf for raid actually. So the big issue here is like, okay, let's say you're playing Dispriest and you stack every single talent, everything that you have in order to put shields on people. Well, it sort of makes sense that like you could make a build that puts shields on people and they can't get one shot and makes them feel safe, right? Like
Sure.
that doesn't seem out of line. The issue is like when you go to a rot fight like Swamp Face or Candle King and you're like healing through the rot damage with shields. And then it's kind of like, wait a second, that doesn't, like in theory, you should be really, really struggling in a fight like that, and you should need your team's sort of support, right? And so now with this big throughput nerf, it's really hard to know how it's going to impact the class because there's a lot of different parts that stack together, and you just sort of have to see if Disc Priest is going to be able to handle those throughput checks. The big issue is like with Disc Priest, this is one of the first times that it's a meta healer because it just makes you feel comfortable and keeps people topped. So like if you have to struggle to make it work with an oracle, you don't want to, right? Because why are you even playing with an oracle Disc Priest if you have to struggle to stay alive? The whole point is that it doesn't do that much damage and it doesn't have that great of a raid buff because it helps you stay alive. So I anticipate that people are gonna try to make oracle work just because everybody has geared priests right now. But ultimately, like if you start going into these keys and they start to feel shaky, I'm gonna expect people are gonna start switching away to other healers. There really hasn't been that many changes. Mistweaver got like very, very slight tuning. Holy Paladin
Apparently,
got very slight buffs.
Apparently, this is 4% HPS nerf to Mistweaver.
So Jade Empowerment basically buffs your chain lightning by a lot, and then it gives you like healing and damage every 30 seconds. The issue is like it's essentially the way at least I see it is it's meant to be like an AoE cooldown and not necessarily on single target. And so that's what this does. So on 5 targets, it's still doing the same healing and damage, but on less than 5 targets now it's going to do less. So if we're looking at like raid HPS specifically or like a single boss,
a single
it's going to be
mob,
doing it's going to be doing like 20% less healing than what it was.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a big deal. Also, they buffed Shaylin's gift by a little bit as well, which is like another AoE healing tool that you can use against single target. Yeah, I don't really think many of the other classes were touched that much. If anything, Holy Priest probably got the biggest buffs, but also Holy Priest was like the least represented. So I kind of expect that a lot of it will come down to can people make Oracle work? And then if not, what fits into the meta the best? I think Resto Druid, Mistweaver, and Holy Paladin are all pretty good right now. We're seeing lots of Boomkin, so I don't expect to see Resto Druid and Boomkin, but I think for like pugging, especially Resto Druid is a really good spec. Mistweaver is doing a lot of damage, especially on single target, so I kind of expect people to try Mistweaver again. And then yeah, maybe people just stick with Oracle because like why not? And everyone has one geared already. I mean, the big thing that I think a lot of people don't think about when we talk about these patches is if you look at the top 20 healers, and it's true for every, DPS tanks and stuff, it's not like if you nerf Oracle Disc Priest, there's going to be 20 new players that rise to the top 20, right? Like it isn't like these people are at the top because Priest is OP. These people are going to be at the top no matter what, right? This is like AJ, Ellismere, Ortimus, Jack, like some of the other Chinese priests. Like these people are going to be in the top 20 no matter what class they play. And so in order for this list to get shaken up, in order to see less priests here, we need those people to literally give up their priests and move on to another character and then start playing that character, right? So if for that to happen, and I'm not saying it will or it won't, it sort of remains to be seen, but like there needs to be a major shift in, to literally get you to log off your character and go start gearing up a new character and bringing it to world first keys. Like that's a big shift. So it's going to take a little while before we see any sort of reaction. But I mean, a good point is going to be to watch what teams are practicing during for TGP as well to see if people go in there with Oracle or if they start with Mistweaver or whatever.
I feel like, and I tried to make this argument a little last week, and I don't know if I necessarily made it that great. I made it whenever I was talking more about tanks. Obviously, the representation of these specializations is very heavily disc favored. It's very heavily vengeance favored. Do you think that like healers are closer together in terms of power than people give them credit for? Or do you think it is just something like Disc is that much better than everybody else that everybody should, if they were playing something else, they should be looking to reroll to a Disc Priest?
Yes and no. I mean, that's a really hard question when it comes to healing because ultimately, like, one of the nice things is that every healer can make the healing checks, right? Like, if you remember back in BFA and probably in Legion too, there's some bosses where you just literally can't heal the highest boss with a
Okay.
lot of the healers.
Yeah.
You know, like you need, like for instance, Galvast, a boss of Temple of Sethralus, that was like the patchwork boss. Like, if you just didn't have a Resto Druid, you were just dead until the other healers got better. Like, at the beginning of the season, you just couldn't beat that boss without a Resto Druid. And there's not really the case of that anymore. Like, I think a lot of healers can heal the top keys, and a lot of that has come down to better balance, has come to better boss tuning. So when it comes to saying like, "Oh, Disc Priest is a way better healer," it does come down a little bit of the age-old argument of skill, you know, being like, "Oh, Ellesmere is the craziest gamer ever because he can heal, but any random idiot can heal this on a Disc Priest," you know, like, it's got a lot of opinions sprinkled into there, and it's hard to tell exactly, like, how much better one is than the other. You know, you hear these people re-roll, and then they're like, "Oh, Disc Priest is a joke, blah, blah, blah," but so yeah, I think when it comes to specifically healing power, it's really hard to measure. When you get to things like damage or utility, that's where it becomes really problematic and obvious. You know, when you have a healer that does 50% more damage than every other healer, or a healer that brings, you know, one thing that no other healer can, and everyone needs that in their group, that's when things get really bad with the healer meta.
Okay.
And that was sort of my point in last week's crash out was that while it's obviously true that Oracle Disc Priest is OP and it's the best healer right now, it's not problematic in a way that stops any other healer from doing the top keys, right? Like any other healer can, now granted, getting invited is hard, but any other healer can step in and heal these bosses. And if it really makes people that upset that Disc Priest has an easier time healing the bosses, it's like, you know, it's not really so bad versus, you know, you literally can't get invited because your healer does half the damage of the meta healer, and you can't even time, you know, you can't even time the key or do these pulls that you normally could with the meta healer.
It's kind of interesting because healer damage does matter, you know, especially for like the highest end groups. Whenever you're doing like a key and LFG or whatever, healer damage is largely irrelevant. But the higher up you go, the more the damage that the healer actually provides matters a lot more. And right now, we're so early on in the season, and we saw this a little bit last season where Resto Shaman was the most popular healer, but then there kind of became a point where you needed the Disc Priest damage, and you couldn't play with the Resto Shaman because they were giving you like 0 DPS gain because you were already playing with like an Ellie or an Enhance. So you were like double up on the buff, and the Resto Shaman did like actually 0 damage. It was kind of crazy. So then everybody got on Disc, right? But you know, we're kind of seeing a similar thing where Disc Priest is kind of this low damage healer, and that you got this Mistweaver monk here, and we can actually, like, you know, if you open up Ortimus's stream, this guy does like 1.1 million DPS overall in a key. Yeah, I mean, his last dungeon, like, he's literally doing 1.1 million overall DPS in a key. And it kind of makes me wonder, is that going to be a shift that we're going to be looking to see? Are people going to actually start picking up Mistweaver monk in the future because they need that damage from their healer specialization?
I mean, that's kind of what I was wondering, that if it would have happened outside of the nerfs too. Like, I'm not saying that Oracle Disc Priest didn't deserve to get nerfed, but I
Yeah.
mean, if one healer is going to be contributing 500,000 more damage than another healer, and the thing about Ortimus, at least from my opinion, is that he's not really a monkey. Like
Oh, he's very
Ellesmere,
good.
and I say this in a way that's positive. Like Ellesmere really freaking pushes the limits of damage, and he's like really trying to play aggressive, damage gear, damage trinkets, damage everything. So when you look at Ellesmere's damage in a key as HPAL, your average HPAL probably isn't going to be able to replicate that without trying really hard. But I think that Ortimus is like more of a well-balanced guy. Like, I think if you played like a Mistweaver and you played like a monkey, you could even be doing some really, really crazy numbers, is sort of my point.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to kind of be interesting, and I think that the TGP, like you said, is going to really show a lot, because I think that these TGP teams, like you're kind of talking about, they're playing with the best players. You have Mode, you have AJ, you have Whippy. They'll start. You have Thanner here. They could play anything, and they can play anything at a world class level, and they will re-roll to it with 0 friction because they're on a tournament realm. And I'm kind of interested
Right.
in seeing what they log into whenever they have the ability to be able to log into whatever they want.
Yeah, a very common, more recent development that has happened here is like you see the meta, then you sort of get the big balance nerf that happens, and then Tournament Realm opens up, right, for TGP. And so teams then go on Tournament Realm, and then they sort of get to see, okay, let's try out all the healers. Let's see what combos are good, right? Maybe there's some world where there's some DPS team that's really good that doesn't involve a boomkin. And then
Yeah.
now you have Resto Druid looking a lot more appealing, right? Like there's a lot of things that are very hard to try on live that people are going to try. And then after sort of TGP happens, then you sort of see everybody being like, realizing that this healer's good and re-rolling or starting to accumulate weekly vaults or whatnot. So it's gonna be a little while. I mean, to be honest, it would be like a huge miss if we just wake up tomorrow and there's no Disc Priest ever, right? Like that would be terrible,
Oh
and I
yeah,
don't
that'd be
expect that to
terrible.
happen.
Yeah.
But and Disc Priest, I think, will still be comfy enough that it'll be existing. I mean, honestly, I hate to be like this I don't know the right word, but basically, we're just gonna wait and see what the Chinese teams do. Like, there's so many good Chinese teams. They also have very good capabilities to gear up characters, and so yeah, we're gonna wait and see
Uh,
what they come up with.
I will say, like reading these disc nerfs, I think the biggest thing to me whenever I read this was like penance damage. I think the wield and woe or the wheel and woe power absorb or powered shield absorb stuff was, it's kind of a thing, but like realistically, you're getting over shielded by so much that there's like a very few situations where this nerf is going to be a big deal. But if you're no longer able to like hit an HPS check because of the penance damage nerf, I think that to me caught my eye as like the biggest change. But what I will say is I suspect that disc is still probably going to be fine, especially to do close to the highest level keys even after this nerf. I don't think that this play style that they have is particularly healthy, which is why you kind of caught me off guard whenever you're like last week, like, what would you nerf about the specialization? Because ultimately, the answer about how I would have nerfed Oracle is like, I don't think that the build that they're like what they're doing, I don't think it's very fair. Having, and I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I think that having the ability to be able to shield your character for 100% of their HP on a very short cooldown, there's a reason that no other healer works like that, and I don't necessarily think it should be a playstyle that is very effective. And so I would be like looking to rework them, which is kind of what you were arguing last week. Is like the only way to appropriately change this is to gut them, which is I don't think fair mid-season.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you sound it out like that, and when you say it like that, it does sound a little absurd. But I guess from my experience, like thinking about doing the dungeons, there's not many parts that feel unfair. Like for example, let's look at Zav, right? Every once in a while just does absurd 2 months of way too much damage, and it's like really one-shotty, right? I don't think a class like Disc is problematic at all on Zav. Like, is it good for that fight? Yeah, but I mean, like, that's well, for lack of a better word, fucking terrible fight. And like having to worry
I'm
about
right
getting
there
one
with you.
shot, right? Having to worry about getting one shot over and over again and like pre-shielding your entire team sucks. So I don't think that's really that bad. I think for like rot fights, I mean, technically it doesn't really matter how you're healing, right? Like if you have a build, you heal a rot fight or you don't heal it. Um, so like there's not really that many situations where it feels really, really unfair, where you're just like, damn, I deserve to die here, but I have an Oracle Disc Priest. Cause like ultimately, like, I don't know, if you get some giant health shield and then you just like fail to kick a cast or like you run into a mine or something. I mean, it's a little unfair, but at the same time, like, well, Dis doesn't have freedom to immune those mines, or Dis doesn't have a kick to stop that cast. Like, Dis doesn't really have the tools to deal with a lot of that, quote unquote failure damage. And shielding and pre-DRing is like really all it would have if it has anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's able to save you in a way that I feel like no other healer can do, which I think is the nice part, right? Like there's specific situations where I'm like, oh shit, I'm like about to die here, and then I get hit with a fat shield and it like is actually saving me. And that's actually something that I wish that they could apply to more healers. And I was kind of bringing this up a little bit last week,
Yes.
where I wish our HP went up by, and I said 100%, but the Blizzard's not gonna Blizzard's not going to do that. But realistically, I wish our HP went up by a ton, and healer power relative to our HP was a lot slower, but so was damage intake, right? Like, I don't think that a healer should be able to top me in 2 globals, realistically. That just doesn't feel super correct. Like, I think that they should actually have to commit a bunch of globals to be able to top you. But at the same point, make those globals more deliberate and more intentional to the point where they're able to save me from dying. Because I think that healer as a role lacks a decent amount of agency for whether or not people live or die. And for people who are pressing their defensives perfectly and perfectly calculating and being premeditated whenever they're pressing their defensives, that's like a very high level skill to obtain. But whenever people do it, of course they're able to live in it, everything, and it doesn't really matter. But for most players are very bad at that too. And I think that like the healer should just have more agency over whether or not people live or die. And I think that, like, you know, making damage a lot slower, more gradual, but the globals that the healer has to commit to them being more deliberate, I feel like that would just make for a better experience for pretty much everybody involved. But that's something that the feeling that Disc Priest gives is that right there, where they can save you in a way that in the past, the only thing that's saving you is pressing a defensive.
Yeah, I think it goes even further than that. I feel like when we have shields, it's sort of we hit an obvious point of like, okay, this is too ridiculous. But even among the archetypes that we have, like for example, you play with a Mistweaver, you kind of know like it's constantly spewing out healing, and so you're constantly being topped all the time.
Yeah.
And so at any point, if you're low HP with a Mistweaver and you're not, your health bar isn't being pushed up, you know you're in trouble. Like in theory, if it should feel very comfortable to play with a Mistweaver. And with H-Pal, for example, it's not necessarily that same like, you know, fountain of healing, but Paladin has like every single heal that Paladin has is basically an instant cast. All of your holy shocks, all of your wogs. So like it's if you're ever in danger, quote unquote, a Paladin should be able to just go bam heal. Even if it's not, you know, your full health bar, it's still dishing that out pretty quick. Then you have a healer like Holy Priest that it's like, well, some of Holy Priest healing is like requires casting, and like you don't know if is your Holy Priest having to move? Is there a heal being cast on me? Like it becomes a little less obvious as to how safe you are. And then you have a class like Prez Evoker, which a lot of people have a problem with, that has such like ridiculous, like hard to understand healing, where it's like, you know, you might be half health, but they have a fully charged stasis and you're fine and they can lay on hands the whole party instantly. But like you don't know that, or like, oh, they're channeling a spirit bloom and they're waiting for that right moment to let the spirit bloom go to heal everybody, but you don't know that, right? Like you can't be it basically like different healers feel more or less comfy to play with. And it's kind of funny that like traditionally I would say like Mistweavers and H-Pal are kind of the more comfy healers because their healing is so straightforward. And now you have Disc Priest of like being able to shield and be even more straightforward and even more comfy.
Yeah.
And now the Holy Paladin is like, wait a second, you know, this is OP, this is crazy. But, you know, from like a Resto Shaman's point of view or a Holy Priest point of view, it's like, well, I wish all my heals were instant cast. Like, I wish I could just bam, bam, instant cast, Holy Shock, you know, Wog, and an emergency. You have like Lay on Hands as a Holy Paladin too. So, I mean, like, if you, in theory, if you were to remove this healing archetype, it would just go back to Holy Paladin being the most, not comfy, but like, you know exactly what to expect and when you're in danger and when you're not in danger compared to playing with some of the other healers.
Yeah. And I mean, I think
Which is just like it's not really, you know, not really actionable. It's just food for thought, right? That like,
yeah.
you know, you're looking at priests and you're like, oh, this is kind of ridiculous, but it does sort of exist already for different healers as it is.
I mean, I'm terrified if I'm not fully topped like at all times. But I think that like you should probably be more comfortable not being topped at like every single point of a pull or every single point of a fight. It should be more like reasonable to be sitting at 60% HP, where in most situations I look at 60% HP as like the next tick of damage is killing me.
Yeah. Well, that's why like it also doesn't feel that crazy, the fact that you can put these giant shields, because the damage is nuts.
Yeah.
Like in some of the fights where Oracle feels really strong, like the the first room of Cinder Brew, or the second room of Cinder Brew, or the third room of Cinder Brew. Like any of those areas, it's like, you put a shield on somebody and it's gone in like 3 seconds. And you're just like, what in the heck? But they have like a keg dot on them, and then they
Yeah.
get a debuff, and then someone throws a chair at them, and it's just like, yeah, the damage in general that people take is so crazy high that, I mean, I think it's an interesting experiment if they would just double everybody's health and just see what happens at M plus. I mean, I
Yeah.
know they'll never do this, but yeah, I think that
Well,
would be
well,
that way, like that discrepancy that I'm talking about between healers of like response time and when you're in danger, just elongate that, right? Like make things less spiky, like bring it back to like, as a healer, your job is to top everyone up before damage events rather than like be instant reacting to, someone getting a debuff and they're dying in 2 ticks, and you need to put a big spell on them and know what to press and plan it out and all that. It's just, I don't know. It's whatever. Like I like healing being fun, and I like the fact that while Disc Priest is pretty easy and really strong, you can still do it on the other healers if you need to. So it's gonna feel bad going back to what we had before, I think, after this.
you want to talk about the other classes that we saw get changes here?
Um, you can go over them if you
So,
feel any were super important.
yeah, we'll talk about some of the most important ones. Unholy, the blood is life. This is probably one of the most controversial talents. People start chanting for blood beasts. If you ever watch a Twitch stream, if you watch Dorky and he's playing his Unholy DK, you hear him go, "Oh fuck, blood beast," and then he
Everybody
immediately,
hold your damage.
yeah, my blood beast is about to explode, and then he dies to getting melee to death. So the blood is life is receiving a 25% damage nerf, going from 25% of the damage that it was contributed whenever the blood beast was out to 20% of the damage. This ends up being around a 2 to 3% damage overall nerf for Unholy. I think blood is life and the blood beast in general was more like a win more type of situation where the Unholy DK was already doing good damage. And if they got good Blood Beast procs at an opportune time, that allowed them to be able to insta-kill a trash pack. But I think that this is a situation where this is the fine nerf, and Unholy's probably still going to be one of the best, if not the best, DPS even after this change. Sigil of Silence now has been changed from 2 seconds to 4 seconds. I have a lot of strong opinions about this one. I think this is so stupid that every single time Vengeance Demon Hunter is heavily played in the meta, Blizzard continues to nerf down their utility, but was this OP last season whenever they weren't a meta tank, or was it not? Like, why are they choosing now to nerf Sigil of Silence? Like, I don't really understand that logic here. Like, was the utility OP or not? Like, please pick one.
I mean, it's just the narrative thing, right? Like, class is good. The community builds up a narrative as to why it's good, and then things get nerfed. But it's like, yeah, you point back to previous seasons and you're like, this didn't, it didn't matter at all. Like, for example, shamans at the beginning of the expansion were like, people were so mad at shamans at the start of the expansion.
About
Everyone
Totem?
was like, this
Or-
is crap. Shaman's so OP. No other healer could do anything. What weren't the shaman nerfs like only poison cleansing totem and like maybe very, very small healing nerfs, if any?
There was
Hold on
something
one
with
sec.
did their HP get nerfed from Vigor?
Sorry, I got distracted by my roommate knocked on my door.
Oh, you're all good. Did their HP get nerfed from Vigor?
Uh,
Or was it the other or was it the surging totem healing rain
it
thing?
was one of them, I think. So basically they had max HP from AV and from downpour
Yeah,
from
yeah.
the totem. One of them got nerfed, but I mean, I like my point is that it wasn't that OP, right? Like if everyone stopped playing shaman, at least at like the top level, because of those small nerfs, it wasn't that OP. But it's like, I don't know, everyone has this like people are like, shaman's so crazy. You have a kick and you have cap totem and you have your knock up and you have all this. It's so bullshit. And then all of a sudden priest takes over and priest has none of that. And it's like, wait a second. Like if all this stuff was so important, why is priest the best healer in every single key? And it's sort of the same now of just like, whenever a class is good, you just like point to all the things that it has. And it's just like, I mean, it just, I don't know. I'm just sort of, I feel like this isn't going to be good for my man of the people points, but I'm getting really jaded about the way the community talks about balance and talks about classes. And like, it just comes down to no matter what's good, if it's good, is it my class? Yes. Okay, shut up and cue Post Malone congratulations. If that's not my class, then just point to everything it has and talk about why that's OP and why you don't have it. And it's just so tough because WoW has this pillar of the way that it's designed to make classes feel OP or good in different scenarios. And
Yeah.
they don't always hit the mark on them, right? Like we'll maybe talk about target capping later, but like that's the whole point of how WoW is designed. Like that's the whole point of the game is that certain classes are going to feel good and bad in different situations. And so whenever you have a class that's good or any class, you can point to that and look at all these different times where the class is feels OP or feels strong. And it's like, just, that's just the game. It's always going to be like this. And it just turns into, everyone just wants their class to be meta or to be invited or to be popular or whatever, as opposed to let's actually talk about the classes and how they should be designed.
So there's this false equivalency too that people like to put on specializations whenever they're good versus bad, where whenever the specialization is good, they're OP because of their utility. More often than not, they're OP because either the damage they do is the best, their
Yes.
ability to be able to survive the highest keys is the best, their healing throughput is the best. Those are kind of the three major pillars for things that you're looking at whenever you're looking at tanks, healers, and DPS for the reasons that those specs are meta. And then they bring the utility that they bring, right? Like you bring the composition that does the most damage and you get whatever utility you get, including if that requires you to play double survival hunter Destro Warlock with a holy priest and have actually zero utility through your key. Like you are going to, I have been around the block too many times and I've seen some really bad metas, and it is never about the utility that the classes have. You make the utility work inside the dungeons and you just figure out a way to make the dungeon as fast as possible with the best composition. And people were saying this about Prot Paladin last year, how Sacrifice was the most overpowered thing ever, how their off healing was too strong, how Bubble Taunt was too good. Is that stuff still too, like how Avenger Shield being able to kick mobs was too good? Is that stuff still too strong or not? Like, why isn't that getting nerfed this patch? I don't know. Like it's one of those things. And then Ellesmere had this tweet where he said, and it's nothing against Ellesmere, but I just can't agree with this. Where he goes, contrary to popular belief, most healers don't want their favorite spec to be OP or broken. They just want it to be competitive. Most healers simply want to be able to play whatever spec they enjoy without having one spec make your group feel significantly safer than the rest. No. What people want, not even just healers, but all DPS, all tanks want all healers. They want whatever spec that they're playing at that moment in time to be the most desired spec for their role. That way they don't have to like sit in group finder waiting to get invited to groups. They don't care if it's balanced or not. They just want to get an invite whenever they're trying to play. And so if that includes their spec being broken, who cares? Like, why do they care if their spec is broken? Blizzard's just going to give them a nice slap on the hand. Vengeance Demon Hunter's the best tank or whatever. Sigil of Silence is now 2 seconds instead of 4. So, okay, fair enough, I guess.
Yeah, to throw Ellesmere a bone, I mean, not that what you said is wrong, but people, I think, maybe in their brain do want, my class to be equal or desired, but that just won't happen, right? Like that's not how the
It's
game
not
works.
happening, right? Like,
Yeah, that's the problem with wanting that, right? Of like, what world has there ever been of, you look at all the top, like, there's all these different healers and everyone's playing different things, and
like
who
one
knows what's
season?
good, and just play whatever you want.
Like Dragonflight
so
season
I was
1,
actually,
maybe?
So I did a little bit of deep dive of some of the seasons, and actually a lot of the statistics are really, really misleading because it's hard to narrow down key levels, and it comes with different patches too. Like for example, season 1 Dragonflight appeared balanced, but really what happened is Evoker came out, Prez Evoker was OP, it did giga damage, then Prez Evoker got nerfed and everyone played Druid, and then Shaman got buffed like 7 times in a row, and then everyone moved to Shaman. And so like if you look at the top keys at the end of the season, everyone was playing Shaman. And it's sort of the same with season 3. The closest I think was season 3 Dragonflight. There was quite a bit of different healers, but ultimately like the meta comp was Druid, right? The meta comp was Shadow Priest, Mage, Aug, Druid, right? Like very few people played like Mistweaver or Disc Priest in that comp at like the very highest level. Like in TGP, it was essentially all Druids. Like the only people that were playing other stuff was they were just playing it because they didn't have a Druid geared or they didn't feel like it or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you might say in your head that you want your class to be equal and everything, but it just doesn't happen. Like there's always going to be something that's favorable. Like that's the reason a meta exists. And you can point to like random fluke seasons or like different situations where you can find statistics that people play different stuff, but ultimately it's like there's going to be classes that are favored, and like you want to be the class that's favored. Yeah, oh, you want every class to be equal, but that's not going to happen. And then the next best thing is, well, your class is the best class.
I actually think that this season is pretty good. I think this season is better than normal, where it feels like we actually have a decent amount of DPS options that are, I don't want to say like completely viable. Like, you're still going to see the top comps doing the top level keys and people really just all inning on like 0.2% damage gains for like rank 1 level keys. But realistically, there is probably 10 specializations for DPS that are at least playable to like pretty decent. To the point where player skill is going to end up mattering way more than what spec you're playing in most situations, assuming that, some player who's playing something that's like decent is slightly better than that. And the same thing is true for healers and tanks, where, while we do have 88% of the tank share being shown to Vengeance Demon Hunter, I will say that some of my most successful keys on the season have been playing with a Prot Warrior, which is occupying 2.3% of the group share right now. Where, in addition to that, I'm playing with like a Disc Priest too, but it's not that Prot Warrior is unplayable, is that Vengeance is the most popular because it gives you, again, that very narrow margin, and then people consolidate their comps into what they see the highest level keys being played. But realistically, I've played with a bunch of different comps, a bunch of different specializations, and this season does feel way better whenever you're playing with some stuff that's not like perfectly in the meta. Like last season, if you weren't playing Aug plus Enhance plus X, your comp was much, much worse than most other seasons. But this season, it's not as clear cut like what the absolute best comp is, and you'll watch compositions where they don't include an Unholy DK or a Fire Mage, and they can still time like really high keys.
Yeah, and I mean, even looking at healers, and again, I'm not denying it. Oracle Disc Priest is OP and it's the best healer, but let's say you're any random person that's not in the title range or whatever, right? Well, I mean, Shaman brings so much more utility to the group and so much more capability to be able to impact the success rate of the key. Like there's a lot of shamans in the meta right now, right? And then you look at that, and then you look at Druid. Druid brings so much to the key, considering that if you don't have a Druid in your team, like you're bringing Mark of the Wild. Mark of the Wild is a crazy raid buff. People would not shut the hell up about raid buff last expansion, and it's barely changed. And I mean, like, Disc Priest, again, like what if you get some stinky Disc Priest in your key that doesn't know, that doesn't have targeted spells and doesn't know who to shield and all that, and like doesn't know where to stand? Like, I don't know. I feel like if you're just one of those people that's like, I'm only gonna invite Oracle Disc Priest to my Pug 12s, like you're just a moron anyway. Like, what do you even like? There's no way it's that
Dude,
powerful.
In my Zero to Hero series, I've been like basically I'm trying to stay away from the Disc Priests, funnily enough. In my Zero to Hero, I'm like, if I had my option, I would probably take a Mistweaver or I mean, I'm playing an Ellie Shaman, so I probably don't want to play Resto Shaman. But realistically, I'd probably take a Mistweaver or an Ellie Shaman 10 times out of 10 for like a 10 or a 12. Just because it's easier to play with.
Well, imagine you were like a Windwalker or something that had no Lust and no Shaman. Like you would be like looking for a Shaman a lot of the times, I bet.
Yeah, because
it makes your it makes your DPS a lot more flexible too, because you have that extra kick, you have that Lust. Like, I don't know. I just don't really buy the whole like I'm doing key levels that are not world first keys, and this is a huge problem for me. Like, okay, I get it, right? If you're Ellismere, if you're Ortimus, and you're like, this is kind of lame. I can't do 19 Priory without a Disc Priest. Like, okay, I'll concede you there, right? That might be a problem. But for everybody else in the world to say that Disc Priest is so oppressive, I was kind of thinking that like, I wonder if people sort of pin a scapegoat on getting declined. You know what I mean? Like they get declined from groups and they're a resto shaman, right? And they think, oh, this guy only accepts disc priests. But like you don't know that. Like you have no idea why that guy declined you, right? Like he could have 10 other better people that are signed up. He could, have his friend that's coming as a shaman. He could hate certain specs. Like I feel like people sort of build this narrative in their head that everyone's waiting for only the meta class and that's why they're declined, when in reality like it could be a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think also it's one of those things that LFG is just so bad for, oh my god, we're talking about this a little bit, but LFG is like really bad because people end up getting declined a lot, but it has nothing actually to do with them. It's that somebody else that is of either equal IO or maybe even slightly higher IO than them on a specialization that fits that comp a little bit better has applied to that group, and so then they take them. And it just is what it is. Like, of course, they're going to get accepted. Okay, anyways, so that was what we were talking about. Vintage Demon Hunter with utility. That's kind of, if it wasn't OP last season, I don't think it's OP this season. This is ridiculous. Sigil Silence is still mostly just used to lock out mobs. It's not used for like the silence effect anymore, which is a ridiculous thing. I don't know how you feel about that, but it is ridiculous that it locks out mobs. Moonkin got a little bit of retooling where they do a little bit more single target, a little bit less AoE. This is like whatever. This is good for raid. Moonkin's already one of the most popular DPS. Probably going to continue to maintain that. Arcane Mage, this is probably the most surprising of the buffs. Arcane getting an aura buff, flat damage increased by 4%. So they were kind of low in terms of overall DPS, but they have some of the best prio damage and the best funnel in the game. And Jang B is learning Arcane because it's an Arcane Dream season. I kind of expect all the mages to get off of Fire and Frost, and now getting onto Arcane.
Well, I mean, my main disc priest is getting nerfed, so now I'm switching to Mage permanently. So, yeah, I mean, the thing about Arcane that's, again, a lot of it has to do with how it fits in with other classes.
Yeah.
We talked about healers and tanks, but a big one for Arcane is like, Arcane really specializes in that like middling number of target range, like doing like 5 targets, for example, right? Whereas you look at Unholy and Boomkin, and those are almost the polar opposite, right? Like Boomkin, okay, single target, and then like wants as many targets as possible otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And then same with Unholy, like it could do okay single target, but then like, it wants 50 mobs. And so those pulls, like a dungeon like Theater of Pain, for example, you're constantly doing these like 4 or 5 mob pulls. A class like Arcane Mage fits in so well with that comp, considering that also you're bringing Arcane Intellect, you're bringing Mage stuff, you're bringing Bloodlust. Like Arcane Mage just feels like it slides so well into that comp. However, I sort of understand,
Shaman
right? Like,
slides into this comp better. Like,
so I just think that there are so few really, really good enhanced shamans. Like, I don't think Ellie Shaman I think you lose too much priority when you bring Ellie, and I think enhanced can, but there's just not enough like really good geared enhanced players. But I do agree that it could.
Yeah.
Like we've been playing with Greg Shaman, same as last season, and that comp still does fine. So my sleeper pick here for that slot is Havoc Demon Hunter, and then playing a different tank. Okay. Because Havoc Demon Hunter, I don't know how it works, but Havoc Demon Hunter has some sort of like ridiculous funnel priority thing going on with its current build.
So it's Wounded Quarry. I think that Havoc Demon Hunter is probably one of the best timer specs on the season just because of the funnel damage. It's not priority damage, it's funnel damage that they're able to do. Now, obviously, doubling up on Vengeance, with doubling up on Demon Hunter with Vengeance is a little bit weird, but I actually don't think it's necessarily that bad. I played earlier on in the season with Enhancement Shaman Moonkin Disc Priest Havoc with a Warrior tank, and I thought it was like pretty good. Like I swear Havoc is much better than people are giving it credit for. I'm right there with you. But yeah, I think Enhance also that's my sleeper pick, I think. But I also think that you can make a really good argument that Hunter is supposed to be the sleeper pick too. That spec is starting to rise. Stonks.
It's a good meta. And even though I crashed out about Disc Priest being nerfed, I think that, in terms of balance of healers, I think it's very reasonable. I think balance of everything is pretty damn reasonable right now. I'll be laughing when it's the end of the season and it's like, it obviously congregates to like 80% representation on certain specs and everyone's complaining about how bad it is.
It's always like that.
It really does feel balanced right now.
It's literally always like that where it's, you consolidate down into one comp because you only have the option, like, the best tank is the best tank, even if it is by only like a very small margin. The best healer is the best healer, and the sweatiest people that are going to play the best tank and the best healer just because they're the best, right?
Yeah, like in order for there to be a bunch of big representation differences in the top 20, that has to be crazy, right?
You have
Because
to,
keep in mind, even the best players are looking at each other and not copying, but like I am even at my best, I'm not the best at every single healer. Like I may look at Mode or AJ and see what they're doing as Disc, and I may look at Ellesmere and see what he's doing as Holy, and look at Ortimus, see what he's doing as Mistweaver, and it's like, for the top healers to not come to an agreement and all play different things because they don't, they think each other is wrong, is like, that has to be crazy good balance, not just for healers, but for everything, right? Because you don't just take the best healer alone in a vacuum. It has to do with the whole comp. So that, like, most of the time, bringing a different healer or a different tank or DPS means other things in the comp are different too. So I mean, like, you're talking insanely unrealistic levels of balance to have that.
it's I think it's closer than people give it credit for, but obviously people are going to consolidate into very small margins. Something that I have noticed that is hella annoying this season, by the way, is tank threat. And Petco had this tweet where apparently you can go get 75 tailoring from BFA, and you can get a enchant that gives you minus 15% threat reduction. There are a couple of specializations this season. I'm thinking Ret Paladin, I'm thinking Dev Evoker, I'm thinking Ellie Shaman, I'm thinking Havoc Demon Hunter, Enhancement Shaman, that can completely rip an entire, Unholy DK in some instances as well, can completely rip an entire trash pack off of a tank right now. Now, Vintage Demon Hunter has a bunch of threat bugs, particularly with mobs that are changing combat states, but also Eldrachi Reaver just generates 0 threat. But dude, I swear to God, even all the other tanks too, this season more than ever, I have seen so many threat-related nonsense deaths where the tank is like actively hitting a pack, and some DPS has waited 15 seconds to target the pack, and they still rip the entire pack off the tank, and it's just like unplayable. I think that this is ridiculous. Blizzard has to look at threat again.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack here. So first of all, about the cape, my understanding, I think this has always been a thing, unless I'm wrong. I could have swore Dorky made people use this in Shadowlands for sure. I remember this cape, and I remember people using it.
Bond was using it before Petco made this tweet. I wonder if Bond inspired him to make the tweet. I'm not really sure, but it has been used before for sure.
My other follow-up question is, I don't remember it being 15%. I remember it being like 2% or 3%. Well, keep in mind it's an old expansion item too, so I didn't test it or anything. This is just from my memory. I remember it being almost nothing. I don't even think it says anything.
Oh, it just says greatly reduce the amount of threat you generate.
And I might be thinking about something different. Like I might be thinking about a different cape enchant. It says 15% in the comments or whatever, but also that's from 7 years ago.
Wow, it comments from 2018.
Oh no, look at exactly what this says. Or wait, never mind. I thought he was saying that the modifier of the cape was nerfed. He's talking about tanks. Anyway, this is gonna get fixed. Blizzard doesn't like people going back and using old profession items. Again, this is something that now that it's in the spotlight, it's gonna get gunned down. So enjoy your threat as it is. So when it comes to like threat in general, there's so many, it feels like, bugs or random things going on with threat that I wish I don't understand why they don't get fixed. Like, I feel like it's really hard to talk about threat in this whole situation when there are just abilities that don't generate threat for tanks that are supposed to, and like situations where if you pull mobs that are out of combat as a demon hunter, you like don't get threat. Like what is even happening with that?
Yeah.
And I think that it's really hard to talk about the state of threat and say that it's good or bad if, there are just bugs that dramatically impact the situation. So I mean, this is like, in my opinion, a top priority thing that they need to look at.
I think they need to make threat just how it is in Final Fantasy, where if the tank is hitting the mobs are like stuck to the tank. Like, I think that's how threat should be. I think that most people tend to agree, like, if your monkey DPS is opening up on a trash pack while the tank only has a heroic throw on them. The DPS is probably supposed to get meleeed and die. The issue occurs is like, 10 seconds into the pull, after the tank is like, 2 or 3 thunderclaps into the pack, and he's pressing revenge and stuff like that, and he's demolishing. And then for some reason, the pack just gets completely like all the mobs in the entire pull get ripped off the tank and just melee your Unholy DK to death. And the only recourse was that he opens up his Blizzard in-game shop. He goes and he clicks on race change, and he changes his character to Nelf because he got a Blood Beast at the exact wrong time. And then he knows in the future he needs to be like walking out of melee range of the mobs, pressing Nelf the moment that Blood Beast is expiring to make sure he's not getting melee to death. That's the only recourse. Like, no, we got to be better. Like, something has to change.
Yeah. Speaking of Havoc Demon Hunter, there's many times this season where Evade has said literally that, like, I was dead right there if I was a Night Elf. And it's like, it's not a matter of he was targeted by things and he melted them off. It was a matter of he got threat on multiple mobs and would have died.
Yeah, I mean, Evade, funnily enough, changed so Player has a setting that can tell you when you're starting to rip threat on mobs, and it will like highlight the threat meter orange. And he is like drastically increased the threat threshold when he sees that he's starting to rip threat on the mob. That way he can tell the tank moments before disaster, yo, I need you to actually taunt this. And it's such a smart thing to be thinking about whenever you're a player like Evade, where there's like this priority mob that you're absolutely funneling into, and you see that it's happening, you're like, okay, I need you to taunt this like right now before I get meleeed. And like maybe most people are supposed to be playing like that, but I think that Blizzard just needs to change threat. I hate how it functions. It's been really obnoxious lately. I see so many deaths to like, Dorky got meleeed on the first pull of Motherload yesterday while I'm playing with Frosty. And it's like, these are two very good players that I'm playing with, right? It's not like Dorky's playing with like Joe Schmo undergear tank. It's like he's playing with a top 5 TGP world level tank.
Well, again, we talk about, all these things that boil down to there aren't enough people playing tanks, and I feel like this is something that needs to go. Like, this isn't necessarily a good, like, there are tanks that are like, oh, I like complex dungeons, I like simple dungeons, I like things to be difficult, I like things to be easy. I don't think there are many tanks that really genuinely enjoy threat mechanics, and if they do, usually they're like less experienced people that just don't play with good DPS and they don't know, or they don't care, and their DPS will die and they'll be like, haha, you deserve that. Like, whereas they're not even participating in the mechanic, they're just saying it's a DPS mechanic.
So threat as a mechanic is one of these things that is, if it is dealt with completely perfectly and you have 0 threat issues in the entirety of the dungeon, it is a completely neutral mechanic. I don't think it ever actively increases your engagement in the dungeon at all. But whenever it goes wrong, it is very negative for everybody involved. For the DPS player that's getting meleeed to death, it is like the worst experience of all time. For the tank who has just lost threat, he knows that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to him. And the healer is sitting there like, well, was I supposed to heal him more? Like, what am I even supposed to do? Like, am I at fault here? And it's like, there's literally nothing that anybody can do the moment that you rip threat.
Yeah, my sort of litmus test for mechanics now of like, are they outdated? Funny enough, is like, how does it feel in hardcore? And if the mechanic feels good in classic hardcore, it probably means it's a dog shit mechanic for retail. And like classic hardcore, like you have that balance, right? Of like, you want the tank to protect you, and you're conserving your own life, and you're holding yourself back. And it's like, these are mechanics that are like very role play in a way, or just like, something that was more about like the fantasy and way less about the gameplay and the strategy, and it just doesn't create good gameplay. It's more about like the experience and how it feels to, oh, my DPS grabbed threat, oh, the zombie is pounding on him, I got a taunt. And it's just like, that's not how it works in retail. Like in retail, you pull threat, the guy just one shots you instantly and you're dead. And it's
exactly.
just like, yeah,
your DPS isn't built to tank a mob either. Like there's no, maybe you can live like an auto attack in a 10. Maybe you can live an auto attack if you're a DK, but like you're dying to the second one that follows if your tank isn't like on their shit too.
Yeah, I've been playing some Mage, as I mentioned. You should pull up this clip. This can be my clip of the week. Even I'm struggling with tank threat, Like I was playing Mage, and I'm just doing my rotation normally on the boss here. Now, granted, I just don't even know how this happened. Like I just arcane missiles, I press one button and I just rip threat off of the tank. and then I die. Like, what am I even supposed to do there? Nothing. Like, so, and you might say, oh, wait for the tank to engage the boss, but I evocated. Okay, I evocated. If I evocated, the next spell has to be arcane missiles on the boss. Like, that's not my fault.
Yeah, now haters would say that that boss opens up with an insane tank buster. By the way, I've actually seen bugs with this tank buster. So let me pull this back up. So this is actually on Rick's of Flux Lane. There's the tank hit, the magic damage tank hit that starts off every single sequence. It's a projectile, and I've seen a couple of weird bugs where people are like dying through brand if they press brand is like the opening global on this, and they're getting hit pre-mit on both SI and brand from like a bear druid or like a vengeance demon hunter. I think the best thing that you can reasonably do whenever you're doing this boss on pull is get pre-DR'd by your healer in some capacity, especially like once you're doing this on like a 15, a 16, a 17. If you eat the PS early, we're pre-getting life cocooned, like something like that. Sacrifice is also great. Like if you eat that right before you pull the boss, that's going to make sure that that DR is appropriately applied, because I've seen some weird stuff where you're taking that hit, that tank hit, pre-mit. So.
Yeah, most WoW people don't know this, but well, you learn it because you die to a mechanic and then you check the death log and it shows your defensive in there and you're like, I pressed it. But for most projectiles in the game, once it's in the air, it's already confirmed. Like, I don't know how exactly it works, but basically,
Yeah,
if you press a defensive while something is in the air, it like many times doesn't like it's already calculated the damage. Now, this isn't the same with absorb. So if you're an overpowered Oracle Disc Priest and you place an absorb shield, the absorb shield doesn't like it doesn't calculate that. But any DR, I think it needs to be like before the projectile cast finishes when it calculates that damage reduction.
You're 100% right, and it's stupid. I mean, if you saw like Vic Goth last season, that guy's probably the best example of that, where because you were just so far from the boss, and so you needed the DR pressed before his Putrid Waters cast went off, not whenever it hit you, because otherwise.
Right. That was the last boss in Siege, the one that shoots the 2 debuffs, and they're like these big like water bolts or whatever through the air, and it's very clear that it's coming towards you and you can press your defensive, but it's the damage is already done. Like, you're already going to get hit by it and you're not mitigating the initial damage, which was like 80% of your health.
So we talked about this a little bit last week, but corruptions aren't actually doing too much, except for one, which Void Ritual. So if you look at some sims for some specializations, Void Ritual is somewhere between, I want to say, like a 3 to 5% damage increase. And then pretty much every other, corruption ends up being like less than 0.5%, like at the best case scenario. So it's kind of funny that all of the ones that are the damage proc ones, you got Echoing Void, Twisted Appendage, Twilight Depth, Infinite Stars, Gushing Wound, the ones that you want to play, are all very, very bad. And the one that gives secondary stats is strong, very strong, like 3% damage, probably too strong. Do you think that something's going to change here?
So do you only get one one corruption? Like, that's it? It's like a Helm enchant?
Yes.
Because like a big theme of the old corruption system was the fact that you could use different amounts of it, and as the patch went on, you could use more and more with the punishment, right?
So it's a purchased enchant, and you can see like it on screen here if you're watching, but like just for the listeners, it says basically apply greater, like use item level 610, greater rune of the Void Ritual, and it'll be like use. Apply Greater Rune of the Void Ritual to a helmet. Gain Void Ritual, giving your spells and abilities a chance to increase secondary stats by 101 every second for 20 seconds. This cannot be applied to items lower than 350 item level, and this effect is fleeting to only work within the War Within Season 2. So, yes, it applies to your helmet, and you only get one of them.
I feel like they shouldn't have even called this corruption. Like, why is it corruption again?
Well, I think they wanted to like reuse Twilight Dev. I think that there's like no corruption that has been in this game's history. Nothing has been more satisfying than getting a really cool Twilight Dev proc. And I probably think that they wanted to like reuse Twilight Dev and kind of cash in on the fact that that was just really fun and cool.
Yeah, because the reason it's cool is because it mows down all the mobs and did infinite damage.
Yes.
Like, that's why it was cool. So, if you get a Twilight Dev proc and it does 2% damage, that's not, I don't know.
Well, they changed Twilight Dev too. So Twilight Dev used to work on your max HP, right? Where now it is allows your attacks to have a chance to trigger Beam of Twilight Devastation, dealing up to a flat amount of shadow damage to enemies in front of you. And so in the past, it would be great for tanks. Like, same with like Echoing Void. It was based on your max HP. And so tanks were very heavily incentivized, instead of running something that was a flat damage proc like Gushing Wound or whatever, they were more incentivized to run things like Echoing Void and Twilight Dev because of how cool they were. I don't know how I feel about this. I think that Void Ritual is going to end up getting nerfed. But the fact that the corruptions as they currently stand are so negligible that they're like within damage variance on Sims is worrying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's whatever. Maybe it'll be fun. Like, make your guy a little bit stronger. It just feels a little bit I don't know, not boring, but just doesn't do it for me, you know?
It's disrespectful to the legacy of corruption.
It just feels like they throw you a bone like in these in-betweener patches or whatever, but it's like so small that it's like doesn't really do that much. Like it's just big enough that it feels like an annoyance to go farm it for your guy if you need it, but it's like doesn't really change that much. Which I mean, I guess is fine. I don't know. Just it's like it's entering the territory of like content that I don't really care about, you know? Like you just look up a guide, you look at whatever the best one is, you equip it, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, that was what was cool about corruption, right? Is that your character felt so different and your character became OP over the course of a patch. I don't know if like one singular corruption on its own is like that fun. I think the fun part of like corruption was, stacking expedient to the moon, or wearing the slappers that were hasted or PPM, and then cooking up this outlaw rogue build with a bunch of Azurite traits that gave you more haste. And so then you got more slapper procs, right? That was cool.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know, it's whatever. It's like it's not a bad system. Like I think they're just playing it overly cautious. I guess that's the word I want to use. It just feels way too cautious.
Yeah.
Where it's like they really don't want to make anybody upset with this system.
You see the stuff about gold swaps now?
Yeah, my good buddy got banned for 2 weeks probably because of this.
Okay, so what exactly is going on with this?
Well,
I've seen
so
people blowing this out of proportion, I feel like, but I don't really understand.
So a pretty common thing in the game is to play multiple versions of the game. You might play SOD, you might play classic hardcore, you might play retail, and sometimes you have a lot of gold on one and you want gold on the other. And, for someone like me, for example, when I'm going hard and hardcore, I may want to, like, I don't personally do this, but I may want to move some gold into hardcore from retail, trade somebody, and then, when I'm done playing hardcore, I may want to sell off all my gold because that's just going to rot on that character anyway. Well, Blizzard has kind of like never really been that official about this, and now they kind of came out and officially said you're not like this isn't supported and you're not supposed to be doing this. The main reason is that it's basically indistinguishable from RMT, right? So like for example, let's say I give you gold. Like let's say I sell you, whatever gold for $100. And then, Blizzard sees that and they try and ban you and you go, no, I gave him SOD gold. And it's just like, well, how do you prove that? You can say, oh, it was another account. Oh, it was this. Oh, it was this other guy. Like, it just seems it's like a messy situation for Blizzard. And while it's convenient for players, it's something that's annoying to Blizzard. So it's kind of like Blizzard is just saying, we don't want to deal with this. So we're just going to let you guys suffer and don't do this anymore.
It read like they were trying to like combat buying gold, and it didn't actually sound. I'm surprised that your friend got banned from it, because it sounded like they weren't going to be looking to ban people necessarily, although they were changing it. They were changing it. It didn't sound like they were going to be banning people. It sounded like it was just like they weren't going to help you at all if something ended up happening where somebody ended up scamming you.
Well, so that's part of it too, is that the communication over this isn't clear. And I may be not up to date here because there may have been clarification, but there were several different posts from different GMs that weren't exactly 100% clear. And you can see based off of this post that we're looking up on Wowheads how they had to like go back and explain and all this shit. Like that's sort of the situation of why a lot of people got upset, is because it felt very unclear as to what the rules are. So like one interesting thing is they basically say this, right? It's an unsupported transaction using, so a supported transaction is using in-game systems to trade, right? And an unsupported is swapping gold between versions of the game. Well, what about a boost? So if you give me 1,000,000 gold and I boost you in raid, you're not using the trade window. You're not using the in-game system to trade. Like you can scam with, like, is that not supported anymore? Right? Like
Oh
it
yeah,
basically opened up more questions and weird
dude.
situations than it actually helped. Because yeah, you see what I'm saying, right? Like this is no different from a lot of other stuff people were doing, and it didn't really solve anything.
I remember first reading this. It was like, this is an unsupported transaction. You can no longer basically trade between people on other realms, which is something that they opened up, like, I don't even know, like the very end of
Yeah.
Dragonflight, your ability to be able to just like trade gold 1-to-1 with people on other realms. And I was like, wait, what? Are they removing that now?
Yeah,
Is
this
that
is a
new?
lot of the chaos around this incident is that the communication around it was so poor and random. And yeah. I think it's hard cuz like part of the joy of the other versions of the game is that there's no WoW token and you're not supposed to RMT, right? Like, but it does make you kind of wish that there was an in-game supported system to like do that, like to
Yeah.
be able to trade classic hardcore gold for retail gold, because people do it anyway. So like, why not have a system to do it?
I mean, boosting. Okay, so I just pulled this up on the
Holy
screen right here.
moly, 676 item level.
So let me just pose this. Boosting, I think, in this game sucks. I think that there's a reason that people are buying boosts, and there's a reason that people are boosting. Like for me, sometimes I'll sell boosts, but realistically, it's really difficult to get gold in this game outside of selling boosts. You could be a auction house goblin, but realistically, I don't have enough hours in the day to be an auction house goblin, so it's like that's not in my bag. So you end up selling boosts, right? And then people end up buying boosts. But I think pretty universally, it is bad for the game just in general to have people who are, in this instance, and you see this DK that's on screen right here. His name is Cheat, and he is the rank 2 Death Knight in the world, and the rank 2 group in the world, and he is 676 item level. And how this happens, and I've talked to some of my friends who play high end on the Chinese scene in the Chinese region, and they basically said that the moment that the first couple of guilds like JTH, Hotpot Hero, whoever, kill the raid, they immediately start selling the entire raid with full loot priority to people. To the point where you get this guy who's got a myth track Jaster Diamond, a myth track Best in Slots, myth track every single piece of tier, myth track Mugsy Neck, myth track this, myth track that, everything. He is basically playing in next patch's gear right now. And I think that things like this, like boosting, absolutely sucks in this game. And I wish they would just like straight up outlaw it. But at the same point, what's going to stop you from being like this guy if boosting is allowed to be on the table too? I think that boosting in this game just sucks and is so unfun.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here too.
Yeah.
I think while
76, by the way.
while it is, we can talk about the China realm or whatever, I do think that this could easily exist on NA or EU. One big thing is like this guy is obviously a good player, right? Like this is where it gets annoying, is when you have that combination of somebody who's a good player and somebody who's buying stuff, right? Because like Liquid, yeah, they don't sell loot priority on the last end bosses, but that's because generally there aren't good enough people that can just like buy boosts and then get the loot. But me, for example, right? Like I'm not saying I'm a great player, like good enough to be in Liquid, but I'm good enough to get carried at least and like do my job and not wipe the raid. And so in theory, if I wanted to, I bet I could talk to Max and say, hey, on your very first reclear, I'll give you 50 million gold if I can get Jaster Diamond and House of Cards and all this, right? And he'd probably say, fuck yeah, we need that gold, right? So there isn't quite the people doing that, but that could exist if there were. And I think that, yeah, the big problem with boosting is it's sort of hidden behind this guise of like, oh, well, what if you're Jim the farmer and you spent all week herbing and selling the herbs on the auction house, and then you bought a boost in a weekly 10 to get your myth track item, right? Like in theory, there's not like, that's not that bad, right? Like you should be able to do other things in the game. Or for example, like let's say you help your friend out in who PvPs, and you help him get his weekly, and then he might help you do, win some arenas or whatever, right? Like, I don't really see things wrong with that. But then, the problem breaks down immediately when you have the WoW token, and it's like, well, you have the guy with the WoW token who spends $200, and not only did he contribute nothing to the economy in terms of the game, but also he's pricing out the people farming the gold naturally too, right? Like, how do you buy a boost naturally when the prices are so insane, when it's like 15 million to get a mythic raid clear? Like, what person farm, maybe if you're some Omega auction house goblin, or like some Omega, first week of the expansion herbalism guy who like studied PTR, you can make that kind of money. But for the most part, like, this type of money is out of range for literally anybody other than people swiping a credit card.
I will say, I also, one of the most dog shit things that I think has also happened and been an evolution of the game recently is people just like blanket needing on every single item with the hopes that somebody's then going to DM them and offer them gold for that item. I think it's so fucking dog shit that these people who are never going to use House of Cards, who don't need this trinket, are spam needing on my fucking item, or somebody's going like tank loot spec or healer loot spec to need on a Mr. Pick Me Up just to sell it to somebody else. Like, oh my god, you got it. I hate 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 it so much.
Yeah, I think it feels a lot worse than it actually is, because it feels so bad when some guy need rolls on an item and then just like want to sell, like, but realistically it's like, well, if it was personal loot, it would just be his anyway. Or if he didn't need it, he might not even be there at the boss, right? Like, he might just, dip out of the last two bosses if he didn't need those items. And so, like, realistically, you're always going to be in a raid where you're fighting for, some item with a lot of different people, because if those people couldn't sell them or do anything with the items, then they would not be there, right?
Yeah, I mean, dude, it was like,
yeah,
it's just
it's still
garbage.
bad. I'm not trying to defend it. It's still bad. I'm just saying it feels even worse than it is bad.
Yeah, I mean, it felt terrible to kill Bandit this week in Heroic. 2 House of Cards drop. I offer 1 million gold to 2 different people, and they've sold it for more than that to different people as well. And they're just actively, they literally are needing on these items, not even just to use them, but to literally sell them to other people. And I'm just like, this game fucking sucks. Like, this game is literally so bad.
Yeah, yeah. The problem is, I think these rare trinkets and items from the raid, Blizzard puts them in the raid and does this raid stuff, right? Specifically to get you to try and find a guild, specifically to get you to find a group of friends and be a part of this thing. And I think that they don't care as much about the Pug raid community, sort of like how they didn't care as much about the Pug M plus community. Like, they're sort of coming around to the idea that people want to Pug hierarchies, but at the end of the day, like, part of the reason that they put those trinkets in there is to, give people a reason to join a guild and be a part of the raid rather than just Pug all day, And not saying it's a good thing, but
Yeah.
I think that it's something that I don't know if they're gonna fix anytime soon.
Oh, I like it's the same thing with the boosting. Like, I think it's actively bad for the game, but I don't think that Blizzard's gonna go ahead and fix it, right? So like, there's nothing stopping me from needing on a bunch of items that I don't need and then selling them.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's the most fair way you could handle loot, right? Like, let's say I go to the raid and I only need 1 trinket from the last boss, and I don't need anything else. Like, I don't know, like, do I really have to sit here through all these bosses and just let everyone else have all the loot and I'm not allowed to gain anything from it? Like, that's part of what Titan Forging accomplished before was, well, in reality, what will I do, right? I'll just not do any of the bosses. I'll just show up for the last boss, only do the last boss, and not do anything else, right? So really, you're rolling against people who need the items. It's not obviously 1-to-1. You have these like group raids, and I might be helping a friend, blah blah blah. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely annoying though. It definitely feels bad.
It's one of those things. I don't think Blizzard's gonna fix it. But like, I would not be upset if they did fix it.
What would you do to fix either the boosting situation or the people selling items situation?
I mean, realistically, the boosting stuff could be curbed by Blizzard just coming out and saying that there's no more boosting. Obviously, it doesn't fix it, but it's there's a lot of people in our circles that are the people who were willing to like sell, who would immediately stop. Now, again, it's not that it would like go all the way to zero. There's always going to be some people buying boosts and stuff like that, even if it was outlawed. But I think that Blizzard just being like, "Yep, this is it. No more boosts in the game," and then it would just like stop mostly.
I agree.
But this, the needing on the items that you don't need thing, it realistically shouldn't be a part of the system. Like you shouldn't be allowed to need on an item that you don't need and then trade it away and then need on it again next week. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, there might be some little loopholes or things that they could do. I mean, who the hell wins 2 House of Cards though? Come on.
But like the only way of fixing that is starting to tackle, like, we're going to change the loot system back to force personal loot and then add Titan Forging back. And that is the way to fix it, but like, there's no good way of fixing it, I think, was your point, and I tend to agree with that.
It's hard. Like, there's always pros and cons to the loot system, you know?
You see the Cyber tweet, by the way?
Yeah. I brought this up on stream.
He says, an interesting part about 0 to Hero is how empty LFG seems to be at these lower key levels. Besides a +7 floodgate, it's been barren. I think a Mythic plus solo queue system could help. So, as somebody who's also doing a 0 to Hero right now, I haven't actually experienced this at all, where the LFG system is barren. Now, I'm not sitting there doing 9s. I'm doing 7s or 10s. But I think that it's kind of weird because 9s are like this dead zone. I'm not, but he also has people in his group. What does he mean?
Well,
it's barren?
Well, so for the people that can't see the image, he says LFG is barren, but there's 1 role that's completely filled in his group and 2 roles that he does not have in his group. And you could probably guess which roles are which. So to say that it's barren is not obvious, is not true. And to say that solo queue will somehow fix the problem, like somehow there's a tank and a healer out there being like, we can't find any DPS. What do we do? We've just been sitting here in the group finder with a tank and a DPS and we can't do anything. Where are they? You know, like, that does not happen. It only happens that you can't find a tank and you can't find a healer. And solo queue does not fix that.
So solo queue, it's kind of interesting. I think that there are a bunch of logistical issues just in general with a solo queue system in Mythic Plus. Right now, Mythic Plus is broken into 2 separate groups, or like ways that you're getting people. First and foremost, the first way is the old natty networking, right? Where you have a group of friends and you are playing with that group of friends and we are doing keys and we don't interact with LFG at all, right? And you have a full 5 stack. The alternative is you use LFG in some capacity. Now, if you add solo queue into the mix, there's a lot of logistical questions about how would you add solo queue into this mix? Would you add it in conjunction, with the other 2 systems where LFG still exists and being able to do your own key still exists? If so, that's going to make the average time to fill a group for the people who are using LFG and for the people who are using the solo queue, that's going to make that go up just in general. In addition to that, I think that there are logistical issues where I think the biggest problem that I have right now with the system is tanks. I think there's a huge tank shortage. It's kind of exists for healers as well, but the tank shortage is the one that's by far the most pressing. And I think if I don't even know if I would necessarily go to a solo queue, but I think that trying to fix the tank shortage is, I would say, my objective number 1, to try to continue to make more groups more often than not.
Yeah, 100%. The problem is tanks. Now, it's true that we procced a solo queue conversation.
Oh God.
The one thing is the big difference. I've thought about this way too much. The big difference between queues and LFG is the queue aspect of it, right? So imagine you have, all the tanks and all the healers and all the DPS standing around, and then all of the best, tanks and healers make a group, and then they grab the best DPS, and it sort of filters out, and eventually you only have DPS left, right? Because that's the most popular role, right? And then, okay, now let's say you're there waiting, right? You're a guy who's like the middle of the pack out of those guys, right? Well, you're waiting for a tank and a healer to show up. Eventually, a tank and a healer will show up, but also more DPS will show up too, right? Everybody's coming to the queue. And the problem is there's not, in the situation of LFG, there's not a queue, right? That tank and healer that shows up is always taking the best DPS, right? So if you're a middle of the road DPS, chances are you're just sitting there as the best DPS shows up, gets invited, and then leaves. And then the new DPS shows up. Okay, this guy sucks. He's waiting forever with me. Okay, the next DPS shows up. He's better than me. Okay, he's gone. And so if you're somebody who's on the bottom half of desirable DPS, you do want a queue, right? A queue is better for you because you're in theory never getting invited because there's always new people showing up who are cutting in line, whether they're overqualified, whether they're a meta spec, whether they have an alt that's high IO, for whatever reason, they get to cut ahead of you. And so solo queue does stop people from being able to cut ahead of you. However, I think a lot of people do like that ability to cut ahead, right? Like you don't like it when you're playing some dog shit character that, is like not meta and you don't feel like pushing up your own key, but it's pretty nice when you have an alt to just be able to get into weekly 10s easier. It's pretty nice if you play a tank to cut in line. It's pretty nice if you are playing the meta spec or you're playing a mage with lust to be able to cut in line in front of other people, right? So it's the people that can't cut in line or the people that want the solo queue. And if they do get it, then they're going to slow down the queue dramatically for the people that are cutting in line. They're basically saying no DPS get to cut in line, and you just get the 3 DPS that you get, as opposed to the tank and healer getting their choosing.
So the type of person that the solo queue would help the most is probably the person who is like solo playing this game via LFG, right? And they're queuing into every single group, and they're not listing their own key ever, right? That is the person that it's in there play a DPS, of course. But that's the person that it would probably positively impact the most. It would negatively impact most of the other players that are involved in the system. Now, I think that that person that I've just described is, I don't think it's the majority of the people that interact with Mythic Plus just in general, but it's becoming a larger and larger piece and a amount of people over time. And I do empathize with those issues that you kind of discussed, where it's difficult for those people to kind of get into a group. But at the same point, queues, at least in my opinion, don't work in World of Warcraft for content that's non-trivial. You want that kind of, whenever we talk about taking the best available player out of LFG, that fits your comp the best. And we were talking about all these viable comps earlier. I think that like you want that level of being able to determine what composition or like decide what comp you're playing all the time.
Yeah, if you're that tanker healer, you want that, right?
Exactly.
You want to pick the best guy out. You don't want to get thrown a guy. Like, who would you rather pick? The best DPS in the pile or the DPS who waited the longest? And it's like, well, maybe you're doing good work for society by taking the DPS who waited the longest. Like, oh, look at this poor guy. Like, he's been sitting around. But, as someone who wants to improve the success rate of their dungeon run, you want the best guy in. So, again, that's sort of, I didn't bring up the effect on tanks and healers, but you're reducing the average quality of group perceived, right? You might say, well, I'm actually better than them, blah, 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 blah. But the perceived quality of your groups is going to go down as a tank or a healer because you're not able to pick up that best person or whatever.
There's other like pretty substantial logistical issues just with the solo queue in general. So solo queues are really good for MMR games where your rating goes up and it goes down, right? With your perceived skill. In Mythic Plus, we kind of have this with the Keystone level where it can potentially go up and down, but rating is static. Once you have achieved that rating, that is the rating that you have. Right now as well, we have pretty substantial bottlenecks. Cybear was kind of talking about this. We do have like very substantial bottlenecks at a couple of key levels. Level 7, level 10, and level 12 are by far the 3 most popular key levels. I think it goes 10, then 7, then 12 in that order. But those are by far the 3 most popular key levels. And so there's like a pretty big bottlenecking at those levels for obvious reasons. Those are reward levels. And so it makes a lot of sense that those are the key levels. But what happens to this person who's like trying to progress 8s if there's no like people in 8s? There's also like different reasons that you do Mythic Plus. There's the, I'm looking for a weekly 10. I'm trying to get like weekly vault cleared up. I'm looking for rewards, right? I'm trying to get that 3K IO achievement. I'm trying to get all my 10 portals. There's the person who's like gearing and all, who they don't really care what happens with the dungeon. They just want to complete the dungeon to be able to get the potential end of dungeon rewards. There's the person who's looking for crests, right? There's a bunch of different groups of people who are actually trying to do these keys. There's somebody in there that's playing with their friends. And I think that LFG is the most flexible system, which is the advantage of LFG just in general, where it allows all of these kind of groups of people to kind of come together and continue to play in a system that works for everybody. And it makes sense for all of these different people. And you see this in like group titles. Sometimes they'll be like, this is a learning group. I'm going to post a group at some point, be like resilient key learning group, right?
Yep.
But what solo queue does is it doesn't allow that level of flexibility as well, where, there's also not score going up and down. Is there going to be like still a bottleneck? How are you going to tackle the vault with this? What exactly is going to happen with end of dungeon rewards? Those are kind of a bunch of questions that have to be answered. And I just don't think a solo queue system really works with how Mythic Plus functions. On top of that as well, I think that if we had a solo queue, and this sounds weird, I don't think you should be allowed to necessarily queue up with your friends, which would make the experience of the solo queue, that makes it better, right? For everybody involved, if you're not allowed to queue with your friends, because then, like Growl said, you're able to get into groups faster. Like you're going to reduce the bottleneck on the system as a whole if people aren't able to queue together. But then that ruins the experience of people trying to play a game, right? Like WoW is an inherently social game, and removing that kind of stuff ruins the game. And then, like I talked about earlier, if you separate it out into 3 separate systems where there are people like Growl and myself that would never interact with this system, we would just continue to queue with our friends. There are people who would continue to use LFG, and there are people that continue to use solo queue. That would increase the amount of time that is required for these people that are using LFG, and the amount of time that is required for these people to get into a dungeon using solo queue. Both of the amount of time required for you to get into a dungeon would go up on both of those types of players, to the point where I think that they would need to remove multiple aspects out of the system and make solo queue like the only possible way of interacting with the system for it to be possible, which also sucks. Like, I don't think that that's something that people would be super happy about either. Like, I think there's just like a lot of logistical issues with like making a solo queue in World of Warcraft, and I think it kind of killed PvP off. I know Squishei thinks that it kept PvP on life support, but I think it has genuinely like killed off Arena.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think also there's a lot of different iterations of what solo queue means. Like for example, you have some bigger streamers who have been big advocates of solo queue, but their idea of solo queue is like being able to queue into high keys with other like good people and like doing challenging content for them, and like possibly even having some sort of, rating system that can go down, and that maybe, for example, you queue in, let's say your average key level in the current system is like 17s. Well, you queue into a key and you're in a 15, random key with 4 other random people, but then you lose rating if you don't time it, right? Like you're expected to time it. Yeah. Well, I think if it was separate, right? It wouldn't be IO, it would be a separate MMR system.
Yeah.
I think that could be cool, right? Because in theory, eventually you would reach some level where you're timing 50% of the keys, right? It wouldn't be the same level that you would be at in a Raider IO system, but it would be at some level, right?
Yeah.
However, I just never see Blizzard doing something like that, number one. And number two, it completely defeats the purpose of the reward system and the keys. Like if you boil that down to low level keys, right? How does that work? Let's say I'm 620 item level. Like, do I just get to queue up and try and push, and get up to 10 keys or whatever and hope I get carried? And then I'm just like farming myth track loot and people can't even decline me because I'm high enough rating or whatever. Realistically, I think what it comes down to, what they would do is have like something very, very simple. Like, for example, these are the qualifications you need to have. Then once you reach them, you can queue for a random plus 10. There's no like matchmaking at all. Literally just takes the first 5 people that it gets, 1 heal, 1 tank, 3 DPS, and then it throws you all together in the dungeon. And like it's mainly used for people who are trying to farm weeklies or farm crests or something. And there's only like a few breakpoints. Like there's like 2, 6, and 10 or whatever, like the ones that people farm. I don't know what the levels are.
Yeah, the problem is like 10s are easy for you and I, right? But 10s I don't think are like trivial content for all players.
Exactly.
And I think that that's the biggest thing is like queuing works for LFR, right? It works for normal and heroic dungeons. Because LFR, you're getting stacks of determination all the time, right? You can't fail LFR. And I think it works for those game modes because they're so trivial enough to where you can't fail them. But Mythic Plus isn't that way. Also, there's kind of this question of like, dude, if I had all my 10s done and I got sent to another 10, like what am I supposed to leave? Like I was supposed to get fed into an 11, but there weren't enough people that were also the same skill where they were also supposed to get fed into 11. So I got sent to a 10. Are you supposed to leave?
But
is it supposed to be an MMR system? Like I don't think it's supposed to be an MMR system either.
Those would be 2 different systems, right? Like an MMR system would be you get paired with people and then you have to succeed or fail and you can lose points. The idea of a queue, which I think they might do, is that like you hit a level that qualifies you, then you can queue for 10s, and you just only queue for 10s, and it's mainly just meant for gear farming. The main issue that I have with that, and I always pose this question to people who say, "Oh yeah, that sounds good. That's a fine system, right?" Is okay, what's the qualification then? What qualification do you need in order to queue for a 10? And it's like, well, let's just start high, right? Let's say you need to have all-time 10s already in order to queue for that, right? People would hate that, right? People would be furious. People like, what's the point of this? You know, if I had all my time 10s, I could just use group finder. Like that's not who who this system is for. So then you start going down and it's like, well, really, if you have requiring any time 10s to queue for a 10 is almost too much, right? Because you need to go into LFG, get those 10s, then come back to the queue. So it's like, okay, well then you're starting to allow people into a 10 who have never even completed a 10 before. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's very, very messy. There's a lot of complications, like you said.
And then you get Thor loser in your 10.
No, Thor loser and Jengi. You're just fucking dead.
You're depleting. I don't know, man. Yeah. Like I get it. Like especially that player, like I said earlier, that solo player that's just like continuing to get declined out of LFG because people in LFG are only looking for people who are overqualified and playing meta specs. Like, yeah, I get it. It feels terrible.
Because you can find those though, right?
Yeah.
Because they exist.
Which means that there aren't enough keys listed. That means that more people need to list their own key.
Well, and because you can't find tanks.
Well,
you can list your key and you might not be able to find a tank. That's the problem.
Yeah, which was fair. But yeah, I don't think that's, circling back to the Cyber tweet, I don't think that solo queue fixes the problem in his tweet. And I don't think the game is barren. I'm getting, like, dude, I queued a shaman key off stream right before this, and it took me, it couldn't have been 5 minutes until I had my group filled for.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes it's annoying, right? But like at the end of the day, you just work through it.
Yeah, I mean sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but it's not like I'm not sitting there for on average like 35 minutes to get a key done. Now, if you're trying to pug like title range keys, that's like a very different conversation in general.
Sure, but there's not going to be a title range solo queue.
Yeah, which I think, funnily enough, I think the title, like the solo queue, if it was for anybody, it would be for like pushing rank 1 title, right?
That would be the most interesting one though, right?
Yeah.
It would be an MMR system with like the best players and like, yeah, absolutely.
I mean but that's like that's not what people want. Like,
that's not what people are asking for.
Yeah. And I don't even think like the high-end players, they're like, yeah, you know what? I kind of like playing with my buds anyways. I don't really mind if it's kind of like this. Okay, so for the cool stuff that I've seen this week, there's a bug on Mugsy that allows him to do 0 mechanics in the intermission. Have you seen this?
The cool stuff that Growl's guild may or may not attempt tonight, and so if the next podcast happens and I'm banned, we know why.
Do you know how this happened?
Do you want the answer?
Yes, I'm waiting.
Step 1, wait for spray and pray to start casting. Step 2, everybody on dirt side spell queue dirt transition as he starts the cast. Then push the boss as he's casting spray and pray. The boss will cancel due to the 40% push to cast electrocution matrix, but then he will not charge because he's casting the dirt phase transition.
It's like, oh my god, you didn't play back then.
Which it might be a total accident if that happens to our guild today.
It's so before you started playing, there was a boss in Antorus called Kingaroth, and I forgot about this until you just said this. This is so funny. Whenever you pushed Kingaroth into the intermission, so he had intermission breakpoints at 66 and 33%. If you pushed him into the intermission whenever he was casting his beam, he would just brick and not do any mechanics for the rest of the fight. And the world first kill of that boss was done like that, completely on accident. But then a lot of other guilds replicated it because it was like, oh wait, hold on, this boss is free. This is, holy moly, I haven't seen something like this in a while. And I mean, look at this. Mugsy basically does 0 mechanics. The only mechanic he looks like he does is the Frost Shatter boots. But he's literally just like sitting here meleeing people. There's no jails. There's no soak. There's literally nothing. Is he even stacking his enrage?
This is great.
Dude, he's not even stacking his enrage either.
Yeah, well, normally the way these bosses work, not a build your own boss, but like, you know, the way that you control the boss from phasing is you have to drag the boss, right? Like for instance, what was that boss at the beginning of Dragonflight, Kurog or whatever,
Oh yeah.
that you'd like drag around? So you'd have to drag that boss. So if it was casting, it couldn't be dragged because it's casting, it was standing there. But because the boss is phased by players on the side, not the boss, you can actually phase the boss while it's casting. And so you basically let it cast and phase it with HP and phase it with people moving at the same time, and it blows it up.
Do you think people could, will, or should get banned for this?
No. I think it's a fine strategy that people should be allowed to use and should not get banned, especially if they're in Drogo's guild.
I don't know, man. I mean, this is really skirting the line.
No, I mean, realistically, this is like, I could see. Well, I mean, here's the thing, right? This is basically the line where you should be banned is that if you have logs of your guild attempting to do this, then I think you should be banned. Like, I think if this just randomly happens by happenstance because that's when you phase the boss and it's a normal time, like, I don't think you should just ban. Like, I don't think as a guild, if you accidentally bug a boss, you should be expected to just give up and throw yourselves off the edge. That was sort of the humble defense of Silken Court, was like, oh, you just got the best pull that your guild has ever had in 2 weeks to the final phase of a boss fight, and now you lose it because Blizzard sucks, right? Like, that shouldn't happen. But if there's evidence of you purposefully going out of your way to try and make a bug happen, then you should be banned, is my personal opinion.
Yeah, the problem is like Blizzard's detection of these kind of things is really bad, right? And the only way that you could actually get caught, right, is, how would you describe it? Is like streaming it, right? Like there's no way for Blizzard to be able to like detect that.
Luckily, Twitter's detection is very good, and everyone's a huge nerd and hates everybody else. And so if a guild exploits it, I'm sure it'll be all over Twitter immediately. But I mean, yeah, technically you're right. If, for instance, if our guild just decided to turn off logs and just do it, I mean, but even then though, right? Like, our guild has 12 pulls on Muggsy. If we kill the boss tonight, like, that's pretty obvious.
Are
right?
you the goats or are you exploiting?
Yeah. 140 pulls on One Armed Bandit, but 20 pulls on Muggsy.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of an interesting decision too. Like, I don't know. I don't think Blizzard's gonna do anything. Like, realistically, I don't think that Blizzard does anything. But I think that it's, you know, it's continuing that trend of like, yep, Blizzard's just gonna let you exploit and you're gonna get away with it.
Yeah. Again, like, I think if it happens to you on accident, you shouldn't be expected to throw the pull.
Yeah.
I don't know the circumstance of Cyber or whatever.
I have no idea if this is intentional exploiting or not. This could, I could see this happening on accident as part of the problem, right? Like, oh, okay.
Oh, 100%.
And the point too is like the boss then doesn't do anything. His best, like their best pull before that was like 16.5%. So they're like more than capable of killing the boss. Then the boss like completely bricks, and they're like, it turned the last phase from like a phase into like not a phase. So we're like, okay, yeah, I would just fucking kill it.
No, they definitely should kill it 100% if it's not on purpose.
I wouldn't stop doing damage. Like, you're asking me, I'm not stopping. All right, let's move on to Q&A. If you want us to make Q&A, you can DM at the BenchWow on Twitter, or you can DM me on Discord to have your question asked in the next episode. This week, we have a really long one. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on this one.
All right.
Squishei fan asks, he says, hello, the bench. Been listening to your stuff since the very first episode, and it's been a part of my normal...
Squishei's been quiet. Are you here, Squishei? That just reminded me.
Maybe he's getting water or something.
All right, whatever. Sorry, Squishei fan, he's not here.
Been listening to your stuff since the very first episode. It's been a part of my Tuesday routine. I have a question for the Q&A section about feeling too bad for your guild or feeling like you've climbed too far up. I pretty much started the game in Dragonflight Season 2 and managed to join a guild that's got its first cutting edge on Sarkareth. Then during Dragonflight Season 4, I went from my world rank 1400 guild to another guild of rank about 300 world rank that raids twice a week. In War Within Season 1, they got their first Hall of Fame, and I'm still with them now, and they're around rank 100. These guys are honestly so much better at the game than me, and parse just much better than I do. I feel like I'm holding the team back, but they keep bringing me to bosses even though we're two people play. Even though there's two other people playing my class. I have two main questions. First off, is it normal to feel this way at a relatively high level? Is it just the Dunning-Kruger effect and it's common, or are they just waiting and hoping to see that I improve? I'm genuinely confused. Second part of this question is I also just learned to play all of my specs at a decent level, so I'm not sure where to go from here improvement-wise. What are some tips to get better at the game? I suspect he's going to be playing like a mage or a hunter or something like that, some pure. I feel like I'm hitting all of my buttons right, but I'm still getting out-parsed fairly hard. I'm also at a loss for how to prepare for a boss without a Dratnos documentary or any public logs to watch, which I've had to do this tier. TLDR on how do you deal with being in a guild where you feel inadequate to be in? Where do you want to start?
I actually feel pretty strongly about all these points. So first of all, you have to realize that the value of somebody who shows up every day on time, who is reasonable, who puts in effort, who isn't a shithead is like way up there. Like I'm telling you that like you don't need like everybody has a hard on for getting a 99 parse or whatever, but bro, please just stop parsing and do the mechanics, man. Like I will trade you for like half of my guild that has better parses, I swear. Like our guild has the opposite problem where everybody's like, yeah, parse 80, parse 90, these guys suck. And then we just, they can't drive the ball on sticks and we just blow up 100 times. So like, by what metric do you think that all these guys are so much better than you? Like, I highly doubt you're like just chain wiping the raid or failing mechanics, because if that's the case, usually people have no problem telling you suck and kicking you, right? Like,
Yeah.
people can't do that enough. So if you're just sitting here being like, I'm green parsing every single boss fight and I don't feel like I'm that good, dude, you could be way more valuable than you think you are. Like a lot of guild leaders would love to have a guy that they can just rely on to not be a dumbass and just do his job and show up, and you can be in a very, very good guild.
So
I mean, I assume you agree with that, right?
yeah, let me go into like officer mode here for a second. So I was an officer in Might through basically all of Shadowlands, and we were like Hall of Fame level. How I would pick our ranged comp. So I was the ranged officer, and I would pick the ranged DPS that we're going to be in. Basically, I was told, yeah, this is the amount of people that we're going to be playing. And we had 2 mage players for a couple of tiers where most Race World First guilds only ran 1. And we ran 2 mages because they were some of the best players on our comp. We also ran a DK DPS in multiple seasons in which DK DPS sucked because the DK DPS was one of the mechanically the best players that we had in our entire raid. And so there are players, and it's especially true whenever you're starting to look at like the guild leadership, they will over prioritize people who don't make mistakes and don't wipe the raid, even if your damage is a little bit lower. You don't need to be doing rank 1 level damage, although doing rank 1 level damage is nice, and you should still continue to try to improve. But you don't need to be doing rank 1 level damage if, like Growl said, you never messed up the ball rolling on Styx Bunk Chunker. If you never died on Sprocket Monger Lock and Stock by getting knocked off the ledge, never messed up your polarity mechanic, never messed up your soaks, stuff like that, the officers are noticing whenever you never make a mistake. If you like never messed up the Halandras bomb, I was like, this guy is the greatest to ever do it. Like if you never missed your soak on Sledge Fist, that's like the greatest player I've ever seen, right? So I think that you might be a little bit too hard on yourself. Obviously, I don't know the exact situation, but it reads to me like you're being a little bit hard on yourself and you're fixating a bit too much on parses and you're not looking at just your gameplay as a whole. Would you tend to agree with that, Growl?
Yeah, 100%.
I think
obviously, again, like you mentioned, parses matter, but
parses do matter, right? Parses matter in terms of like getting your foot in the door, and you can't like maintain really suboptimal damage, otherwise you're going to get kicked. Like that's just the truth of it. But you're not getting kicked and you're still getting play. Like you're not even on the outs. You're still getting prog time.
And then so for the second part of the question, basically like I'm in a guild now that's very good to the point where it isn't obvious what I should be doing. Like when you don't set foot in a mythic until week 2, or you're only on the easy bosses and you have time to like watch the whole Race to World First and see what everybody crafts and see what trinkets they farm and then just copy that, it is a lot easier. The best thing I'd say is you just have to be more active in finding things. Like, for example, you mentioned public logs. Like, well, you might not have a public log, but I mean, all the Race to World First people are streaming their POV for the entire time, right? Like,
Hmm.
if you wanted to see when Nick is sending his ramps on Disc Priest, you can watch his VOD and you can see every single ramp, right? You just gotta open up the VOD and write it down. Or if you want to see what trinkets are good and there's not updated information yet, you might have to go in the class Discord and do some control F and search and see what some of the smart guys are saying, right? Like you just have to dig for the information a little bit more in terms of setup. Um, I'll let you in on a little secret though. Literally nobody knows how to progress raids at a very high level and like figure stuff out for themselves except for like let's call it 3 guilds right now, maybe 4. I don't know very much about how advanced China is, but I mean, guilds that are like top 10 to top 20, I'm telling you that they don't have the best players at figuring things out. They have the best players at knowing how to copy Liquid and Echo.
Dude, Dratnos, the moment that Gallywix dies, he walks up to THD and he goes, "Yo, can you guys send me all your weak ores and any of the strat stuff that we need to know about all these bosses?" Like they got, I don't even know what they were, like world rank like top 15 or something like that this tier. So yeah, I wouldn't feel too bad about your play. One thing that you can do is your officers, they're the people who are making the strat for your guild, right? They've determined what strat your guys' guild is going to use. So they've already put in a bunch of time into figuring out what's going to happen. You can always go to your officers as well. Like Growl said, you can watch any of the Race to World first progression back. And I think that watching wipes is just as useful as watching kill attempts. People really love to fixate on kill attempts because it has all of the information. But watching wipes is honestly just as important because you get a lot of the nuanced things that can potentially cause issues or wipes. And you start to understand why are you pressing your alter time here? Why are you pressing your turtle here? Those kind of things you end up learning. Oh, why is he dropping his port here? Oh, he's able to capitalize on making sure that he's just getting a couple more Chaos Bolt casts at this point. And those are the kind of things that you end up figuring out whenever you watch a little bit more progression. Alternatively, yeah, you know what you said. We're going to watch a Dratnos documentary or look at logs. But there's also other ways of learning on the fly that this helped me whenever the last year in Vault of the Incarnates, or one of the last years I raided in Vault of the Incarnates, Razageth was actually a particularly hard encounter for me. But one of the things that I did after the first night, I vowed to never let myself get knocked off by the winds again. Now that didn't happen, but I was annoyed. And I was getting pushed off the platform too often for me to be okay with it. So what I did was I went and watched Lorgok's POV of a bunch of their attempts on Raz. And I had a weak aura set up that during specific times in combat on that fight, it would throw a text on my screen telling me what I needed to do next, right? Whether it be I'm stamp roaring next, whether or not I'm wild charge plus whatevering, whether or not I'm making sure that I'm in bear form wild charging, or I'm getting time spiraled, I'm pressing dash, I'm gating into something else, right? And I just made sure that that sequence at those specific times on the fight was always calculated with exactly what I need. And you can take some time out of your week. I know, this you're in it spending a decent amount of time, but you're probably already spending a decent amount of time anyways. You can set up like liquid reminders or that note week aura that I had. I don't even know where it is. I don't remember what it's called, but I'm sure that somebody in your guild will probably have it, especially if you're rating in Hall of Fame level. And you can set it up to throw on specific encounters at specific times into the fight, where you can always set reminders for yourself for things that you think are going to be the most important for yourself. And that will help you as well continue to come more prepared than the rest of your guild, because I promise the rest of your guildmates are not doing that.
Yeah, and so the stuff about looking at wipes is really good because you want to see what the primary parts of the bosses are that you're going to struggle on. But
Yeah.
you've sort of mentioned that it's probably the case that you want to improve your damage and you feel like your mechanics are at a good level. So in terms of improving your damage or your like parses, really the question is, if you have a blank canvas, are you doing your rotation properly? Right now, it's hard. I don't know if you mentioned what role he plays, but
It
if
reads like it reads like a ranged
it
DPS.
reads like a DPS. So basically, if you have a blank canvas, are you doing your rotation properly, right? And that's really easy because you can just hit a target dummy, right? You can just look at sims, you can compare to other people, you can even ask the people in your guild, literally just hit a target dummy and see how you do, right? You can know if your rotation is good or not. If it's not, then well, okay, we need to record yourself. We need to figure out what you're doing wrong, having better people than you look at it, right? Like I'm sure there's basically no matter what role you play, I'm sure you can find somebody that you can send them 10 or 20 bucks and say, "Hey, look at this and tell me everything I'm doing wrong," and there's someone that will help you.
I don't even know if you necessarily even need to like send somebody 10 or 20 bucks. You have people in your guild who you say parse better
Yeah,
than you.
100%,
Like we already
100%.
have these people in our guild that can parse better than us. Like they can tell us, I think, what we're doing wrong damage wise, and they're in the same raid as us too.
And then after that, if you feel like you can do your rotation well on dummies, but it sort of falls apart in raid when things happen, now you know what to look for, right? Now you know, like, okay, well, things are breaking down. Where are they breaking down, right? And then you can sort of do what Tettles said of like, okay, watch somebody who's really good in Echo and see how do they handle this part, right? Like, let's say you get a soak and you have to take it all the way to the other edge of the room and you lose a bunch of damage, whatever, right? You might now you know, okay, let me watch this. And then you see, oh, they actually hold their cooldowns for 5 seconds because then they can see if they get the soak and then they send after,
Yeah.
right? Or they might, you might watch a pull where they get the soak and they're like, God fucking damn it. And then they just get owned, right? And then you're like, well, okay, that's just a mechanic that I might get that there's nothing I can really do about, right? But the thing about that is you have to know what you're looking for and be specific, right? You can't just like, unless you have a really good mind for it, you can't just watch a VOD and pick these things up. You have to literally like be watching the fight, knowing that this is a pain point, seeing that it's going to happen, then looking to see how other people deal with it, if that makes sense.
Damage uptime, especially like I assume that you're ranged, but you might also be a melee, so we can just be a little bit more specific here. Damage uptime and like GCD uptime is probably the most important thing, as well as like a damage dealer. A lot of the times the difference in damage between some of the people who are doing like rank 1 parses versus, or like, say you're 50th percentile parsing, the difference between you who is like 50th percentile parsing and somebody who's 90th percentile parsing is probably pretty narrow, especially for some of the harder to kill bosses like a Mugsy or whatever. It's not going to be like that wide of a damage gap. It might be a couple 100,000 DPS, but the way that you get that couple 100,000 DPS is like it's like a snowball effect, right? Your positioning on pull mattered a lot, right? You being able to shimmer into a spot or pre-port into a spot where you kind of knew what was happening was going to be like a huge deal, and making sure that you get like a couple of extra casts here and there ended up converting into more spenders that were able to be pressed, or more globals that were on the boss that were able to be dealt. And those are like huge deals, like long term, for being able to just like optimize the amount of globals that are pressed on the boss. I don't think that most people aren't going to get a rank 1 parse. Like there's only one rank 1 parse. Like, so I don't think that like going for that is necessarily attainable. But if we're looking to improve from like a 50th percentile parser to like a 90th percentile parser, most of that's going to be in terms of like movement and uptime on the boss, just damage wise. So think about ways that you can improve that. Like make it like Growl talked about this a couple episodes ago, and I think this is like especially true for range DPS as well. Like he was talking about his positioning on Silken Court. Was that the fight that you were saying that you were struggling through positioning on that fight?
Silken Core and Fire Rack were two of the fights we're
Yeah.
watching a lot of VODs hold.
Yeah, like he was like, oh, okay, I was standing in this spot, but then I watched this other VOD, and this guy is literally just like, he starts the fight in a completely different spot, and I never considered it before, but then that saved me 5 globals, and that's like, that's the thing that you have to be paying attention to. Like, those 5 globals matter a lot. So, yeah. I don't think that you should feel like, I don't think that you're, especially since you're not getting benched, I wouldn't even be concerned.
Yeah, again, that's not your fucking job, too. Like, it's not your job to be like, I'm gonna bow out. I'm holding the guild back. Like, it's just very unlikely that that's the case. And if it is the case, then you'll find out at the end of the tier when you get kicked.
Yeah,
and they just needed, they needed somebody.
I promise though, like, whenever I'm picking comps, there was very few times where, especially in like a Hall of Fame level guild, I was thinking about somebody's damage. So there are specs that are required in the comp, right? And you start by building a comp with those people, and then everything else you're like, yep, everything else is going to kind of slot into place. Who are the best available people on our roster right now that is going to make progression on this boss the easiest? And then I would just like select the best mechanical players from ranged to be able to help.
Yeah, I think you're overthinking it too much, and you're thinking that like, oh, they really like me and they have all these other better options, but they really believe in me or something like that, which is like
They probably just
maybe
think you won't
possibly
fuck up.
true. But I mean, like, I think the truth of the matter is like you're just doing fine. And like, yeah, you may not be the all-star of the guild, but also like, if you're somebody that they're putting in on all the hard bosses, like, you're a very valuable member. Like every guild wants people that are reliable that they can put in on those bosses.
Don't care, got cutting edge.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Any final thoughts?
Nope. I'm gonna grab some food and raid and hopefully kill Muggsy. No, I doubt we're actually gonna do that exploit. That would be really funny though.
All right. GN everybody.
Peace, guys.